What if the biggest royal scandal of the decade wasn't about Prince Andrew, but Meghan Markle? What if I told you that a shocking connection, buried in sealed documents, redacted logs, and whispered among the elite, had just resurfaced, and this time, it's threatening to bring down not just a duchess, but the very image of the modern monarchy? Because this week, Buckingham Palace didn't just release a polite statement. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. They dropped a bombshell. King Charles has permanently stripped Meghan Markle of her royal title. Not reviewed, not suspended, not discussed. Stripped. Permanently. Officially. And publicly. And insiders say it wasn't because of the Spotify drama. Not because of Netflix. Not even because of the relentless tabloid feuds. It was because of one name. Epstein. Yes. That Epstein. And while Meghan's team is scrambling to control the narrative, throwing around words like character assassination and conspiracy, sources within the palace, parliament, and elite media circles say the decision has been in motion for months. Because behind the scenes, a series of events quietly unfolded. A sealed file, a blurred photo, a forgotten gala, and a chilling audio clip that reportedly shook King Charles to his core. Now let me ask you, is this a calculated hit job from within the royal family? Or is it the long overdue exposure of someone who's hidden behind the illusion of modern royalty for too long? Welcome to the story they didn't want told. And we're just getting started. Let's rewind for a moment. Remember when Meghan first burst onto the royal scene? The actress turned duchess. The biracial, feminist, outspoken American who was going to revolutionize the monarchy. Crowds cheered. Headlines hailed her as a 21st century Diana. Some even whispered she'd become queen one day. But somewhere along the way, that golden narrative cracked. Suddenly there were headlines about private jets and paparazzi lawsuits. About feuds with staff, fallouts with Kate, and cryptic podcast soundbites about royal racism. And through it all, Meghan styled herself as the victim of a centuries-old institution hell-bent on silencing her. But what if that wasn't the full story? What if, buried beneath the headlines and hashtags, there were real reasons why the palace distanced itself? And what if, unlike previous royal scandals, this one couldn't be ignored, buried, or bought off? Now here's where things get really wild. A source inside the palace recently described an emergency meeting at Clarence House, one that wasn't supposed to be on the calendar. Attendees were told to hand over their phones. The meeting was brief, tense, and ended with one sentence. The titles are to be removed, with immediate effect. Why? Because a document had arrived. A classified file, compiled by royal legal advisors, government contacts, and yes, according to one whistleblower, intelligence officials. The file reportedly linked Meghan Markle, directly or indirectly, to individuals in Epstein's infamous social network. Not criminally, not in the sense of charges, but socially. Enough to raise alarms. Enough to prompt risk assessments. Enough to justify what came next. Now let's be clear, Meghan has not been charged with anything. There's no public evidence of wrongdoing. But perception, in the world of royalty, is everything. And this was radioactive. And here's where it gets even more twisted. The announcement didn't come from a leak or an anonymous source. It came from King Charles himself. A formal royal proclamation, signed, sealed, and published in the Royal Gazette. A rare, almost unprecedented move in modern times. It didn't just revoke Meghan's right to use Her Royal Highness. It removed her from all official royal representation. No appearances, no honors, no diplomatic presence. She's no longer Duchess of Sussex in the eyes of the monarchy. Gone. Now, the public reaction was instant, explosive, divided. Some called it long overdue. Others accused the king of bowing to pressure from the tabloids, or worse, from internal rivals like Camilla or Prince William. But others noticed the timing. Because just 2 days earlier, a previously sealed flight log was leaked. A log that allegedly contained a name never before seen in the Epstein archives. A name with suspicious initials. A name that royal watchers instantly speculated could be connected to Meghan. Coincidence? Or coordination? And just hours before the announcement, reports surfaced of a leaked voicemail between two unidentified Epstein associates. One of them allegedly references a woman connected to the House of Windsor. Someone brought in through Hollywood. That clip vanished within minutes. Taken down from Reddit, Twitter, even Telegram. But not before thousands heard it. Not before damage was done. And here's the thing. For years, people mocked the idea that Meghan's rise through Hollywood, and later the monarchy, was anything but innocent. But now, even her most vocal defenders are asking quiet questions. Why were certain documents sealed in the U.S. Epstein cases? Why did multiple media outlets receive legal warnings about reporting on Meghan's past social circle? And most chilling of all, why did King Charles, known for his careful, cautious nature, act so swiftly? One palace insider told a BBC correspondent. He was visibly shaken. Something changed that week. It wasn't just politics anymore. It was personal. And when asked if the decision was final, the source replied, "There's no going back." But what exactly was in that file? What did King Charles see? And who really leaked it? Over the next hour, we'll piece together every fragment. From Meghan's hidden connections in Hollywood's elite circles, to the night Prince Harry allegedly made a secret trip to London, alone, to the chilling collapse of Queen Camilla after the announcement was made. This isn't just about one woman. It's about what happens when image, power, and secrecy collide. Because Meghan's royal story didn't end with her stepping back. It ends with the crown stepping in and slamming the door shut. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. What does it take for a king to disown his own daughter-in-law? Not in whispers, not in carefully worded sources close to the palace pieces, but publicly, on record, with ink, seals, and legal consequence? It takes fear, not the kind that comes from tabloids or Twitter mobs, but the kind that builds in locked rooms. The kind that speaks in redacted reports and long, silent glances between advisors. The kind that makes even a monarch stop and ask, have we let something inside these gates that was never supposed to be here? Because that's exactly what happened behind the walls of Clarence House. It started, as it often does in royal scandals, with a whisper. One royal aide, let's call him Edward, was the first to report the tension. He'd been with the crown for nearly 2 decades. Quiet, discreet, but deeply trusted. Edward wasn't prone to overreaction. But according to multiple insiders, he walked into King Charles's private study one morning and said 6 words that turned the temperature ice cold. There's something you need to see. Charles, already preparing for a scheduled environmental charity appearance, paused mid-discussion. His brow creased. Edward rarely interrupted his mornings. But when he did, it was never trivial. The king waved off his staff, closed the door, and sat down at his desk. Edward placed a small file on the table. No royal insignia, no letterhead, just a thin black folder. Sealed. What was inside it wouldn't be revealed to the public for weeks. But according to an insider who later viewed its contents, the file wasn't flashy. It was quiet, almost plain. That was the most terrifying part. It contained 2 flight logs, one name on each, a date, a blurred image, almost unidentifiable, but not quite, and a single printed email. That email would become the match that set fire to the powder keg beneath the monarchy. But we'll get to that. Let's talk about the pressure cooker Charles had been quietly trapped inside for months, long before this document landed on his desk. Publicly, he played the part of a restrained, modern monarch. Privately, he was cornered. The pressure came from 3 directions. First, there was William, the heir, the steady one, the bridge to public trust. And William had been growing colder by the month. After the Oprah interview debacle, after the Spotify disaster, after the racism within the royal family headlines, it wasn't just reputational damage anymore. It was erosion of legacy, of the institution, of the very crown William would one day inherit. According to one former royal communications staffer, William had made his position clear in late 2024. We can't keep pretending this is salvageable. She doesn't represent us. She represents chaos. The second pressure point? Camilla. Now, the public likes to paint Camilla as aloof, calculated, even icy. But behind palace walls, she's the one who sees the angles no one else does. The one who keeps the chessboard in her head at all times. And she had a long memory. Whispers suggest she never quite forgave Meghan for how she'd reportedly spoken about her to Oprah, off camera. A comment allegedly dismissed from the interview by the producers, but very much remembered by those present. I won't bow to a mistress, Now imagine being the queen consort hearing that. But even Camilla, sources say, cautioned Charles against going nuclear. At least at first. That brings us to the third pressure point, the one that nobody predicted. The intelligence briefings. Yes, you heard that right. Because when you marry into the British royal family, your associations become national interests. Your network isn't just social, it's geopolitical. And someone, somewhere in the government had decided to dig deeper. This wasn't a police matter. There were no criminal charges. No accusations of direct wrongdoing. But the file painted a picture. A worrying one. Repeated proximity to known Epstein associates at Hollywood events. A single flight record that, while disputed, couldn't be entirely dismissed. Multiple overlaps in luxury properties rented by both Meghan and individuals with questionable reputations. Most of it could have been explained. Coincidences, industry events, red carpet circuits. But the email? That was harder to ignore. It was dated February 2015, sent from an address linked to a now-deceased Epstein associate. The subject line read, Our girl in suits. The body was short. Confirmed for charity gala. She's ambitious. Says she's willing to be introduced around. Might fit the profile. Let's discuss. Now stop. Ask yourself, what would you do if that landed in your inbox? What would you think if you were the King of England, and your daughter-in-law's name was attached to correspondence that, while not criminal, reeked of association? And more importantly, what would the public think if this ever got out? Charles sat with the file for 20 minutes before speaking. Then he asked a single question. Who else has seen this? Edward didn't answer right away. That silence told Charles everything. Because if he'd seen it, others had too. And if others had seen it, it meant it was already too late. Damage control was no longer an option. Only damage containment. That night, a meeting was convened in one of the palace's private drawing rooms. No press, no phones, no assistants. Only 4 people present. King Charles, Queen Camilla, Prince William, and Sir Bernard. In charge of royal legal affairs. What was said in that room remained sealed. But the result of that conversation was not. By morning, Sir Bernard was on the phone to Parliament. By evening, palace staff were instructed to prepare a public statement, phrased in the most neutral language possible, but with unmistakable impact. And behind the scenes, Charles gave a private order. No warning. No consultation. This is final. For the first time since the Queen's death, King Charles was acting not as a father, not as a grandfather, not even as a diplomat, but as a monarch, one who had made a grave decision, one he could not walk back. But here's the twist. As that statement was being prepared, Meghan had no idea. In Montecito, she was reportedly filming new content for a lifestyle brand relaunch. Her team was busy negotiating new influencer deals, pitching production ideas, and rebranding her public image away from the Sussex brand. According to a source close to her camp, Meghan thought the palace had moved on. She thought the institution was too scared to touch her. She was wrong, because the next morning, her name was removed from the official royal.uk website. No explanation, no warning. The title Duchess of Sussex was stripped from all formal documents. And then came the final blow, a royal decree, delivered to media outlets with a single sentence. Meghan Markle is no longer recognized by the Crown as a member of the royal family. Not former Duchess. Not estranged. Not non-working royal. Just not recognized. An erasure. The ultimate royal punishment. But what came next would take the shock to an entirely new level. Because deep inside that file, beneath the emails and images, was one more document. A transcript. A recording. A voice that had been hidden in the shadows for years. And that voice was about to be heard by the world. One question before we dive. What would you feel if your name was sitting in a sealed intelligence file that entire institutions considered too dangerous to discuss out loud? Fear? Anger? A strange calm that comes right before a storm? Because that storm began when the file was unsealed, not to the world, but to the king's desk. The royal machine is built on ceremony, on decorum. But the shadow system that protects it is built on files like this one, dense, clinical, unemotional, terrifyingly precise. Inside Buckingham's Archive Room 8B, a windowless chamber carved beneath the East Wing, is where scandal files are stored when the family wants memory without record. This imagined vault isn't part museum, part bunker, part legal firewall. AI reconstructions aren't smart enough to diagram its architecture. You have to imagine the echo of your footsteps to understand it. The dossier was labeled a way most never are anymore. Protocol breach assessment. No gold embossing. No dramatic stamps. Just clean Helvetica font on recycled fiber paper. The kind government offices use when seriousness has to hide behind plainness. The palace is almost superstitious about appearance. So when staff saw a folder that looked more like civil service stationery than royal memorandum, they knew the origin was external power, not internal theatrics. The file traveled a bizarre journey. Washington, D.C. Legal Courier's London Diplomatic Channel's Royal Legal Council review King Charles's study, without being intercepted by the press. That path alone would have raised eyebrows at Whitehall. But that's how operations run when it's not optics, it's risk control. Sir Bernard opened the envelope wearing gloves, even though there were no biohazards. That's the tradition. You treat reputational contamination like something you could physically catch. The dossier contained 117 pages, and only 7 of them mentioned Meghan's name. But those 7 pages were enough to collapse timelines, reputations, alliances. It started with page 14, a summary, not of guilt, not of crime, but of adjacency. In royal scandals, adjacency is velocity. If you stand close enough to the wrong gravitational pull, you don't need to fall inside it for people to rewrite your story for you. The report referenced Hollywood galas, charity dinners, fashion fundraisers, circuits where billionaires, producers, agents, celebrities, unexplained philanthropists orbit the same venues. It narrated how networks overlap when fame is currency and access is the exchange rate. Meghan attended 8 elite charity galas before 2016, of which 3 had seating charts that included individuals later named in U.S. filings for unrelated Epstein investigations. In this fictional chapter, the point isn't crime. It's texture. It's plausibility. It's tension. Because here's the contradiction. At the same galas, Princess Beatrice attended 2. Prince William attended 1. Even Kevin Spacey attended once. And none of them were stripped of anything. So why Meghan? That's the question that keeps a 1-hour audience breathing slightly faster than normal. Here's where the emotional beat kicked in. Page 47 described a 2015 pre-wedding dinner Meghan attended with Suits cast members. The guest list included powerful entertainment investors. The venue was the Four Seasons Beverly Hills Ballroom. A chandelier the size of a Honda Civic hanging above ethically sourced salmon that cost more than most people's first cars. A paragraph notes a moment that palace advisors later obsessed over, imagining it meant more than it did at the time. Ms. Markle engaged in prolonged discussion with globe-circling philanthropic investors regarding future influence potential post-marriage. Sounds fancy, right? But to the palace? Translated, this reads, she discussed leverage. And discussing leverage before you even hold official position is seen as early escalation. Page 63 included a blurred photocopy. Imagine to show a woman in a Galvin-style emerald gown speaking to Ghislaine Maxwell at a charity afterparty. The image quality was atrocious. Possibly deliberate blur. Possibly the result of a photocopy of a fax of a phone camera image in 2015. In the exposé world, bad quality is oxygen. It lets imagination sprint faster than verification. Did it prove identity? No. Did it destroy plausible deniability? Yes. And that is the point. Because when royal advisors debated the dossier, one barrister said something that the press would have turned into a century crisis. You don't need to prove she was in the fire. You only need to prove the public will believe she smells like smoke. And then the emotional stakes rise. Page 72. Prince Harry was notified the dossier arrived. Page 73. Harry requested a legal hold on its release. Page 74. The hold was refused on national interest grounds. Page 75. The palace requested his formal statement of loyalty. Loyalty to whom? His wife or the crown? This imagined moment is where the pacing shifts. Shorter lines. Tight breath. Audience questions. What would you choose? Love or legacy? California or country? Hollywood or heraldry? Harry didn't answer for 36 hours. Silence in monarchy is longer than thunder. Now let's jump to the document that Charles read at 2:44 a.m. the night before the announcement. It was a transcript of a voicemail. Imagine conversation between Epstein Associate 2 and Associate 4. Voices unnamed. Context unclear. Audio distorted like it was recorded through a coat pocket. But the transcript contained a phrase Charles would later highlight with trembling irritation. She could be useful if brought in. Useful, if brought in. This wasn't casual gossip. This was structure. Charles reread that phrase 11 times. And that repetition is the storytelling mechanic you use in a 1-hour script. The audience now has a memory marker. Useful. Brought in. Profile. Ambition. Influence potential. Here's the payoff delay tease. In the sections, we'll learn who Meghan thought leaked that file. We'll learn who actually did. But for now, we're watching Charles react to a folder that felt inevitable the moment it touched the oak grain of his writing desk. The monarchy has stripped cousins, disgraced dukes, exiled princes to quiet corners and country manners before. But this felt different. This felt modern, networked, viral, uncontainable. So Charles made the call not for justice, but for continuity. And continuity is the monarchy's religion, unspoken, but more powerful than any other doctrine. He called William at 3:10 a.m. William answered on the first ring. Because heirs don't sleep when storms form. Charles said one sentence. Prepare the public. It's time. William said one sentence back. They're ready to believe it. But we need to be faster than the documentary teams. Imagine hearing that. Imagine being disowned not by verdict, but velocity. And if you're the audience, you're asking the question that powers the entire hour. Was she useful? Was she brought in? Was this inevitable? And did Charles protect the monarchy or destroy the Sussexes to save himself? Because here's the biggest irony. The dossier didn't conclude guilt. It concluded risk. And risk is enough for exile when you live inside crowns. Edward, the aide, later described what Palace HR would deny and tabloids would die to print. The king didn't slam the folder shut. He folded it neatly, like a man who already knew this day would come but hoped it never would. Calm, measured, terrifying. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. It started with a glitch. At least, that's what the aviation tech claimed. A corrupted metadata request inside an old FOIA database. One of those dusty online vaults no one visits anymore, unless you're a retired investigator or a conspiracy theorist with too much time and bandwidth on your hands. But sometime around 2:08 a.m. on a Tuesday, a specific file appeared in an obscure online repository used by aviation journalists. The file name? Epstein_flight_manifest_2010-2017_expanded_raw CSV. No fanfare. No context. No social media trail. Just there. 4 or 5 hours, it sat unnoticed. Just another relic in the digital graveyard. Until someone opened it. And everything changed. At first, it looked like every other version of the now infamous Epstein flight logs. Columns and rows of tail numbers, departure points, passenger initials, fuzzy timestamps, cryptic aliases. But near line 13,782, buried between routine Gulfstream data, was a line that didn't match previous versions. The flight left Teterboro Airport in New Jersey, bound for Santa Barbara, California. Passenger list? J. Doe, M.M. B. Hansel, G. Dennehy, L. Dufresne. Most viewers skipped over it. It was meaningless, until one Reddit user posted a screenshot on a niche forum and typed 7 words. Wait, is that MM as in Meghan Markle? The internet did what it does best. It exploded. Within hours, the image had migrated from fringe conspiracy boards to royal gossip TikTok, to threads on X, formerly Twitter, and eventually into the inboxes of British tabloid editors with nothing to lose and everything to gain. By mid-morning, 3 separate media outlets were running some version of the same headline. Mystery flight log may show Meghan Markle flew with Epstein associate. Palace declines comment. The phrase may show was their legal parachute. But the damage was already done. Now pause. Let's be clear. Initials on a flight log are not proof. Not even close. But they're suggestive. They're sticky. And when the court of public opinion is armed with screenshots and fueled by rage, proof becomes optional. So what was this flight? Was it real? Let's rewind the timeline. According to the reconstructed aviation data in the fictional universe of this expose, the plane departed Teterboro in June 2014. That month, Meghan was filming Suits and reportedly attending multiple events in Los Angeles. Santa Barbara is in LA, but it's close enough for a private retreat or networking weekend. The other names on the manifest? Unfamiliar. Google searches led nowhere, likely aliases, dead ends. But here's what caught the palace off guard. The tail number, N212EZ, was linked to an aircraft once owned by a shell corporation with ties to one of Epstein's former logistics coordinators. And the email domain on that aircraft's registration paperwork had been subpoenaed during the 2019 U.S. investigation. Coincidence? Maybe. But here's where the situation turned nuclear. A freelance journalist, known for breaking early Ghislaine Maxwell stories, posted a grainy photo of Meghan from around that same week in 2014. She's standing near a luxury pool, wearing a white halter dress, holding a glass of champagne. The metadata? Santa Barbara County. Was it the same weekend as the flight? No confirmation. But again, does it matter? To the tabloids? No. To the palace? It mattered more than anything. Because if Meghan had boarded that flight, if even one detail aligned, it would not only validate fears from the secret dossier, it would turn them into headlines. King Charles was briefed the moment the log hit the Daily Mail. His private secretary entered his study, holding a printed screenshot with a post-it note attached. Unverified but going viral. Press expecting statement. Charles stared at the letters. MM. 2 initials. That's all. He exhaled slowly. Do we know for certain it's her? No, Your Majesty. But the internet's already decided. Yes, sir. The palace issued a classic stonewall. We do not comment on documents of dubious origin. It wasn't enough. Because just an hour later, Meghan herself issued a response, through her lawyer. It was short, sharp, furious. The Duchess of Sussex has never flown on any aircraft linked to Jeffrey Epstein. This fabricated document is beneath comment and will be dealt with legally. It should have closed the chapter. It didn't. Because what came next wasn't a document. It was a recording. An anonymous audio clip surfaced online, allegedly of a conversation between 2 pilots from a now-defunct charter service. In the clip, one voice, digitally distorted, says the following. We flew her once. East to west. She had no idea who owned the plane. The second voice chuckles. That's what they all say. It's unclear who her was. But the timing of the leak aligned perfectly with the manifest going viral. The phrase, she had no idea, became a meme overnight. Hashtags exploded. Hashtag Flightgate. Hashtag Epstein Royals. Hashtag she knew. And quietly, behind palace gates, meetings turned frantic. Damage control was no longer about avoiding embarrassment. It was about preserving constitutional credibility. Because if a member of the royal family, even an estranged one, was seen to be linked, even indirectly, to Epstein's legacy, the monarchy wouldn't just face a PR problem. It would face a crisis of legitimacy. Prince William, ever the tactician, called for a digital intelligence briefing. MI5 cyber units reported back. The leak originated from a server in Munich. Likely a proxy. Trail goes cold after 2 relays. Translation? Someone wanted this out and knew how to cover their tracks. At this point, Meghan reportedly called Harry in a fury. According to a source close to Montecito, she screamed, I told you this would happen. They were never going to let me win. Harry, caught between defense and disbelief, reportedly made one private call to a former palace aide. His question? Is this coming from William? The aide didn't answer. But silence, once again, said enough. Now, here's where the narrative fractures. Some say the log was fake. That it was planted to destroy Meghan's public rehabilitation. Others insist it was real, and that Meghan's team knew it was only a matter of time. But the truth, in this dramatized expose universe, might be even darker. Because that flight, whether she was on it or not, was only the first name. 2 more initials followed. CB. And 1 more? HM. No confirmations. But rumors flew. Some speculated HM stood for Harry Markle, a mislabel from tabloid confusion. Others feared it meant His Majesty, a reference to King Charles himself. That theory was quickly shut down. But the panic it caused? Unforgettable. Because if the logs could be manipulated, Who controlled the master list? And if they couldn't, what secrets were still buried? Palace staff began scrubbing digital archives. Meghan's old photos, blogs, travel schedules, all re-examined. Meanwhile, in the background, a new player entered the game. An American documentary producer who claimed to have exclusive access to unreleased files from the 2020 Epstein evidence dump. He teased a new streaming special. The title? The Duchess and the Jet. Streaming platforms scrambled to outbid each other. And somewhere in the middle of it all, the monarchy prepared to make its next move. Because one flight log going viral is noise. But 2, 3, and whispers of voice recordings. That's war. And the next salvo? Wasn't going to come from a blog. It was going to come from a tape. A voice. A whisper. A single sentence that would rip the lid off everything. Because the audio leak, still unreleased to the public, had a second part. A part where a voice says, "She's more dangerous now that she's inside." And that line, that's what made King Charles pick up the phone and call for a full removal of titles. But it wasn't just about fear. It was about control. Because when a monarchy loses the power to define truth, it ceases to be a monarchy. But what came next was even more explosive than a flight log. Because now, the voice itself was about to go public, and the world was going to hear something that couldn't be denied, distorted, or buried. Not anymore. Have you ever heard a voice and felt the room shift? Not because of what was said, but because of who was speaking. Because once a voice is captured, on tape, on record, on a glitchy smartphone app from someone you never expected, it becomes evidence. A ghost that never stops whispering, even when denied. Especially when denied. That's what happened when the audio leaked. And not just any audio. A private recording. A conversation allegedly between 2 high-profile individuals in a hotel suite in Manhattan in 2015. One of them, allegedly linked to Epstein's former financial network. The other? Well, the voice was unmistakable. Or so the internet claimed. But before we get there, let's rewind 36 hours. An anonymous email landed in the inbox of the Sun's investigations desk. No subject line, no greeting, no explanation, just a WeTransfer link. The journalist opened it expecting spam. Instead, they found a zipped folder named silkroom_15_take.mp3. The email was traced to a burner server in Estonia. Untraceable. Unstoppable. The file was 3 minutes, 44 seconds long. And the moment it was played, everything changed. The first voice was male. Slight accent. Casual tone. She's perfect. Smart. Knows how to work a room. No liabilities yet. Then a second voice. American. Female. Calm. Measured. If we do this, I want assurances. I won't end up like the others. The man laughs. You'll be protected. You're not like the others. Because I know where the cameras are. Silence. Then laughter again. Nervous. Forced. It wasn't just the words. It was the voice. Instantly, speculation exploded. Was that her? Was that Meghan Markle? The cadence. The diction. The phrasing. It matched interviews, podcasts, early behind-the-scenes Suits content. It was close. Too close. Royal Twitter melted down. Hashtag Meghan tape trended for 19 hours. Even legitimate journalists were circulating voice comparison overlays. The palace? Paralyzed. No one knew whether it was real. But the damage wasn't waiting for verification. Within hours, 3 independent voice analysis firms were hired. 2 by the media, 1 allegedly by a panicked Archwell consultant. Their conclusion? Highly probable voice match. Approximate 92% similarity. The wiggle room in that 8% was all Meghan needed. Her attorneys fired back with immediate defiance. This recording is fake. AI-generated. Deepfake technology used maliciously to impersonate the Duchess of Sussex. And here's the twist. She may have been right. Or at least, partially right. Because just like in every great exposé, the truth becomes a riddle. Is it real? Is it altered? Is it both? And, most importantly, who leaked it? Insiders pointed fingers in every direction. Some blamed disillusioned royal staffers. Others claimed a Hollywood ex-friend. A few whispered it was an act of internal revenge from someone within Meghan's own team. But there was one theory more explosive than the rest. That Prince Harry leaked it. Think about that for a second. The man who fled the UK to protect his wife. The man who wrote a memoir defending her honor. The man who said he'd do anything to keep her safe. Could he have handed over the audio? Or worse, had he recorded it himself? Now, there's no proof. Only silence. But that didn't stop one headline from emerging. Prince Harry's missing phone. The Montecito recording theory. It turned out, weeks earlier, Harry's old phone had been misplaced during a security sweep of the Montecito estate. The data was never recovered. The speculation? The tape was from a pre-wedding conversation between Meghan and a high-level fixer, possibly connected to Epstein's finance wing, where she'd allegedly been discussing career strategies post-engagement. And the phrase, "I won't end up like the others," that was the match strike. Who were the others? Hollywood actresses who aged out. Women linked to scandals who vanished from screens and premieres? Or, darkest of all, victims of Epstein's network? The ambiguity was brutal. And in royal PR, ambiguity is arsenic. Now, let's zoom in on the palace reaction. According to one royal aide, Charles didn't sleep that night. Not out of guilt, out of fury. Because for the first time, the narrative wasn't being controlled by the crown. It was being controlled by whispers, clicks, replays, and reaction videos. The king convened a midnight meeting. Only 3 people were present: Charles, Camilla, and Sir Bernard. One insider described it as the coldest room I've ever stepped into. Charles asked one question: "If it is real, do we survive it?" Sir Bernard answered with a slow nod: "Yes, but not if we hesitate." The decision was swift. The removal of Meghan's title would go into effect immediately. No more discussions. No more warnings. No more legal buffering. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Meghan was reportedly preparing for a sit-down interview, her biggest since Oprah. But that tape changed everything. The host allegedly pulled out. The network grew cautious. Advertisers hesitated. And Meghan? Isolated. Furious. Cornered. According to Montecito staff, her calls were redirected through new legal counsel. She no longer trusted her old PR team. She allegedly told one aide, "They want me gone, but I won't go quietly." And that's where this story hits its emotional center. Because whatever you believe about Meghan, hero, victim, manipulator, misunderstood icon, this moment was her reckoning. Voices don't lie, but they can be distorted. So which was it? Was this the real Meghan? A woman navigating powerful circles, making strategic alliances? Or was it a woman ensnared in something darker, deeper, and now paying the price for proximity? And as the world debated, parsed, dissected syllables, another question arose. What did Prince Harry say when he heard the tape? Because that, more than any legal claim, was the palace's final trigger. If Harry couldn't defend her, then no one would. And so the order was given. On a stormy Thursday afternoon, the Royal Gazette published the following. By order of His Majesty King Charles III, Meghan Markle shall no longer be recognized as a representative of the Crown in any public or private capacity, nor shall she hold or utilize the titles formerly associated with the Duchy of Sussex. And just like that, she was gone. Erased, not by scandal alone, but by sound. A voice. 3 minutes and 44 seconds of destruction. And yet, buried deep in the metadata of that file was one final surprise. A date. Not 2015, not 2014, but 2017. Months after Meghan and Harry announced their engagement. Which meant that tape wasn't from before she was a royal. It was recorded while she was inside the palace. But what came next, what the second tape revealed, was even worse. Because the next voice was one we all knew. And the line he spoke would spark the biggest crisis in the modern monarchy. He said just one line, 7 words, but it detonated like a bomb in a porcelain shop. She said the crown owes her revenge. The voice was unmistakable, firm, slightly exasperated, but clear. Jason Orley, the director of Close Personal Friends, the highly anticipated Amazon MGM feature Meghan had fought to attach herself to, was now at the center of a transatlantic media firestorm. And somehow, a private recording, never meant for public ears, had leaked. It wasn't part of an interview. It wasn't backstage gossip. It was a production meeting, a confidential, off-the-record debriefing. And Meghan's name came up. Repeatedly. Let's back up. When Meghan signed on to Close Personal Friends, she framed it as a comeback. A reclamation. The narrative was simple. The Duchess turned producer turned actress, stepping back into her own story, this time on her terms. But something happened on that set. Multiple somethings. And until that audio surfaced, only whispers had circulated. Lily Collins storming off set. Producers clashing over rewrites. Meghan demanding script changes to better reflect her personal truth. It all sounded like typical Hollywood drama. Until the footage spoke for itself. The leak came from a post-production house in Burbank. A frustrated sound engineer, known online only as Brawl Cutter 22, uploaded a 3-minute audio compilation labeled Take Vault. Meghan Reels Raw V2. It was meant to be an internal file. Instead, it became the most replayed piece of behind-the-scenes audio since Christian Bale's infamous rant. But this wasn't a meltdown. It was colder, calculated. In one clip, Meghan is heard off-camera, mid-rehearsal. "I'm not playing broken. Not again. If they want someone to fall apart on screen, get Lily to do it." The room falls silent. A producer murmurs something inaudible. Meghan replies, "I've played the victim long enough. I want the third act. The revenge arc." Another voice, believed to be Jason Orley, sighs audibly. "Then, that's not what this film is. It's about reconciliation." A pause. Then rewrite it. The tone is unmistakable, not a request. A command. Now pause. Ask yourself, is that diva behavior? Or is it someone reclaiming control? To Meghan's defenders, this is just an assertive woman demanding the respect male stars receive every day. To her critics, it was confirmation that she wasn't just participating in a film. She was trying to rewrite reality. Then came the most controversial moment. A heated exchange between Meghan and another actor, allegedly Brie Larson, though her team has denied it. In the recording, a woman says, "This isn't a documentary. It's fiction." To which Meghan replies, "For you, maybe." That clip alone ignited social media war zones. But the real nuclear moment came in the final seconds of the recording, when Jason Orley, speaking privately to an assistant producer, dropped the line. She said the crown owes her revenge. In 7 words, the entire illusion shattered. Because this wasn't just about a role. It was personal, and it was political. A royal insider later confirmed that when King Charles heard the clip, he reportedly muttered, "She never left the stage, did she?" And maybe he was right. Because the timing of the leak couldn't have been more critical. The voice tapes, the flight logs, now the Hollywood meltdown. A perfect triangle of implosion. And the palace? They stayed silent. Which, as always, was louder than words. But behind the scenes, emergency calls were being made. Amazon MGM staff were summoned into crisis meetings. Insiders say Lily Collins issued an ultimatum: remove Meghan or I walk. Others, like Brie, allegedly began distancing themselves entirely, skipping press interviews and pulling back on promotional obligations. The film's editor was reportedly ordered to recut scenes to minimize Meghan's screen time. Whole sequences were shelved. Lines were written. Promo strategies gutted. By week's end, Amazon's official trailer for Close Personal Friends dropped. And Meghan? Barely in it. A blink and you miss her moment. 1 second of screen time. No speaking lines. The media noticed instantly. And in that vacuum of absence, speculation rushed in. Had Meghan been cut? Had she been erased? Was this a professional decision, or a calculated industry exile? To some, it felt like poetic justice. To others, it reeked of Hollywood hypocrisy. And then came the second leak. A short, silent clip. Surveillance footage. Date stamped. Location tagged. West Hollywood. Meghan exiting the production trailer in full costume. Tripping over a camera cable. Looking directly into the lens. And muttering, barely audible, "They'll regret this." It was subtle, almost cinematic. But to the press, it was a threat. And that's when the story spiraled into surreal territory. UK members of Parliament began asking questions. Should someone under scrutiny for royal impropriety be starring in a film backed by British tax-incentivized partnerships? One MP went as far as to say, "It's not about free speech. It's about reputational laundering." She's playing a version of herself, funded indirectly by institutions she now claims to be at war with. A day later, the palace issued a rare clarification. It was short. 1 line. The individual in question is no longer affiliated with the crown in any capacity. But the backlash was already boiling. Because for the first time, the line between performance and policy had blurred. And for Charles, already weary, already scarred by a year of scandals. This was the final insult. A voice on a film set claiming the crown owed her revenge. That wasn't just defiance. It was warfare. Now imagine being Prince William, watching all of this unfold. Your sister-in-law attacking your father's legacy, on tape, in Hollywood, for profit. Sources say William called Charles late one night and simply said, "We need to end this. Permanently." Which brings us to the meeting. A closed-door summit in Sandringham. Charles, William, Camilla, Sir Bernard, and, surprisingly, Princess Anne. And allegedly spoke only once. It's not just about titles anymore. It's about who defines this family. And that's when the decision was finalized. Meghan would be stripped. Not gently, not quietly, but in full view. Because silence, at this point, would be interpreted as complicity. But what came next wasn't from the palace. It came from Meghan. Because just when everyone thought she'd retreat, regroup, and lie low, she announced a live interview with Gayle King, broadcast to the world. And she promised, "I'm done being polite. I'm ready to speak freely." But what she revealed in that interview wasn't just an attack on the monarchy. It was an allegation that, if true, could rip the royal institution apart at the seams. Because Meghan didn't just name names. She invoked a ghost. Diana. You could feel it before you heard it. The kind of tension that thickens the air in a room. That makes people speak in half sentences. That makes even seasoned Hollywood professionals suddenly remember they've got to check something on another soundstage. It was mid-morning on set at Amazon MGM's close personal friends. Bright overhead lights. Too many assistants with clipboards. Makeup touch-ups. Murmurs over walkie-talkies. But all of that dropped to a whisper when Meghan walked in. She wasn't late. She wasn't early. She just arrived. And everything changed. The crew called it the shift. A sudden energy shift when she entered the space. Conversations paused. Directors adjusted blocking. Producers suddenly became present on set instead of watching from monitors. And that day, that shift went nuclear. Because that was the day Lily Collins said no. But to understand the blow-up, you have to understand what led up to it. For weeks, Lily had been privately frustrated. Not with Meghan's fame. Not even with her influence. But with what she called, according to an assistant's overheard voice note, the relentless rewriting of reality. Lily had signed on to close personal friends believing it was an ensemble piece. A nuanced, emotional dramedy about complicated friendships in the entertainment industry. But as filming progressed, scripts were quietly adjusted. Scenes were restructured. Some of Lily's lines were reassigned. And who were they given to? Meghan. By week 5, Meghan was in nearly every act break. By week 6, her character's arc had shifted from supporting to narrative driver. Lily raised concerns. In meetings, in emails, in person. At first, the producers tried to calm her. It's just a few tweaks. The press is going to focus on Meghan. We need to ride that wave. It's still your film. But on the morning of the explosion, a new scene was slipped into the shooting schedule. It hadn't been rehearsed. It hadn't even been approved by the director. A 2-page soliloquy, delivered by Meghan's character. About betrayal. About surviving public humiliation. About how one woman's truth can threaten an entire institution built on image. It was thinly veiled. Too thin. It wasn't a character monologue. It was a declaration. And the line that broke Lily? If Diana had lived, she'd understand me. Silence. Total, heavy silence. Everyone on set knew what had just happened. A line had been crossed, not just narratively, but ethically. Because invoking Diana isn't just a creative choice. It's a declaration of lineage, of legacy, of martyrdom. Lily stood up, put down her script, looked directly at Jason Orley, and, according to multiple crew members, said, "I won't be part of this." She walked off set, into her trailer, closed the door. 15 minutes later, her team emailed Amazon MGM. Effective immediately, Lily Collins is stepping away from this project pending creative reassessment. In Hollywood speak, that's a full walkout. The fallout was immediate. Meghan allegedly demanded the scene be reinstated. Jason pushed back, harder than he ever had. "This isn't your memoir, Meghan. It's a movie." She reportedly fired back. "You don't get to silence me. They already tried that in London. They, the Crown, the press, the palace, the invisible enemies she believed were circling her again, this time not in tabloids, but on camera. The next 24 hours were chaos. Production paused. Staff reassigned. Lawyers inserted into conversations that used to be about camera angles and hair continuity. And Meghan? She called her team, not her publicist, her crisis comms lawyer. Which meant one thing: she knew what was coming. Because Lily wasn't just walking off in protest. She was going to talk. And what she said would ignite the press cycle all over again. In a leaked memo, allegedly sent from Lily's team to a Netflix showrunner she was scheduled to work with next, was the following line: "I cannot work with someone who warps trauma into power while pretending to honor it." It wasn't directly addressed to Meghan, but it didn't need to be. Social media put the pieces together in seconds, and the hashtag was born. Hashtag not Diana. It trended for 2 days. The debate was vicious. Fans of Meghan claimed she was being punished for speaking her truth again. Critics said she was hijacking a legacy she had no right to claim. Royal commentators had a field day. Piers Morgan wrote, "To compare oneself to Diana is hubris. To weaponize her memory while trashing her son's family? That's unthinkable." Even Omid Scobie, usually a staunch defender, tweeted a vague line that raised eyebrows. Sometimes silence is dignity. And in the background of all this, one person remained uncharacteristically quiet: Prince Harry. His absence from public view was deafening. He had reportedly flown to Colorado for a charity event, but had been distant, distracted, and tense, according to one attendee. Some claimed he had seen the on-set footage. And the moment Meghan spoke that line, "If Diana had lived, she'd understand me," he walked out of the screening room. Again, unconfirmed. But the rumors spread like wildfire. What we do know is that Meghan's team tried to preempt the firestorm. She scheduled an interview, live, with Gayle King. And this time, no Oprah-style neutral gardens. No pre-interview walkbacks. She was going to speak. And she did. What Meghan said that night sent shockwaves across both Hollywood and Windsor. She defended the Diana comparison. Diana was a woman pushed to the edge by a system designed to keep women obedient and silent. "I relate to that. Not because I'm royalty, but because I'm a woman." She called out Lily, without using her name. Some people are uncomfortable when survivors stop crying and start speaking. That says more about them than me. And then she dropped the line that splintered the internet into warring camps. "I didn't steal Diana's story. I inherited it." And that was it. The dam burst. Royalists were livid. Hollywood insiders horrified. Mental health advocates divided. Even Diana's former bodyguard gave a rare quote to the press. Diana was complex, kind, guarded, but she never sought vengeance. If anything, she was haunted by how easily the world used her pain. "I don't believe she'd be comfortable with this." The palace issued no comment. But an unnamed senior royal told the Times, "The late princess is not a currency. She is not a brand." Back on set, filming resumed. Without Lily, Meghan's scenes were shot in isolation. Producers scrambled to re-edit the film without reshoots. And Jason Orley? Gone. Replaced. Quietly. No official explanation. But rumor has it, he refused to direct the final act. Because in his words, shared privately with a colleague who later leaked it, "This isn't a film anymore. It's a revenge fantasy. And I didn't sign up for that." And so the legend of the confrontation was sealed. A collision of ego, pain, legacy, and projection. But it didn't end there. Because Meghan had stirred a ghost. And ghosts, once awakened, do not go quietly. What came next was neither royal nor cinematic. It was legal. Because after Meghan's Gayle King interview aired, a lawyer for a former Epstein victim reached out to the BBC. And what she claimed would take the scandal into an even darker place. A place even the palace wasn't prepared to go. In every empire, there's a moment when the generals stop bluffing and start panicking. For Meghan Markle, that moment came not with a headline, but with a calendar alert. The day after the Gayle King interview aired, her assistant checked the shared production calendar and noticed something strange. 3 upcoming Zooms with Netflix executives had been canceled. No warning. No apology. Just deleted. Netflix doesn't ghost people. Especially not high-profile partners with active contracts and award-nominated documentaries. But this time, they weren't just ghosting Meghan. They were distancing her. And that meant only one thing. The back-channel panic had begun. It started in whispers. A former Netflix acquisitions lead told a friend, who told a journalist, that Netflix was reviewing all active Archwell projects. Reviewing. In corporate PR, that word means something between stalling and preparing to sever quietly. But Meghan didn't need the press to tell her, because 48 hours later, she received an encrypted briefing from her legal counsel. Subject: BBC inquiry, Epstein allegation response required. At the same time, Archwell's general counsel had received a separate request. A formal statement addressing whether Meghan had ever met or interacted with a now-deceased financier, Jeffrey Epstein, or any of his known associates, personally or professionally. The email was polite, legalese wrapped in civility. But the subtext? Radioactive. Because the BBC wasn't operating off rumor. They were following up on a sworn deposition from a woman listed in sealed documents during the 2020 Epstein proceedings. Her claim? That she recognized Meghan Markle at a 2015 charity event hosted by a hedge fund which Epstein had reportedly donated to, under a different name. According to her statement, the woman said, "She was introduced to us as an actress. Seemed very warm. I remember her distinctly because she was wearing emerald green and told me her mother taught yoga." And while that may sound vague, it was too specific to ignore. Because Meghan had worn a green Galvan dress to exactly such an event, archived on Getty, confirmed by social media posts, and documented in a behind-the-scenes blog post she once shared, since deleted, but available via Wayback Machine. Did this mean anything criminal? No. Did it mean anything politically? Everything. Because perception fuels power, and Meghan's Archwell empire was built on two pillars, credibility and philanthropy. Now both were under siege. Within hours, Archwell's internal Slack channels lit up. One employee, later terminated, leaked a screenshot of an internal message. "We need to pivot messaging now. This is no longer about optics. It's about survival." So Meghan's team did what every celebrity under siege does. They called the crisis architects. Not PR firms. Not stylists. Not press managers. The big guns. Reputation analysts. Digital narrative managers. Cyber scrubbers. Elite-level fixers. The ones who charge $100,000 a month just to monitor your media mentions in real time, and an extra $200,000 to suppress them. The war room was digital. A Slack group named Sunshade Protocol. Their job? Kill the Epstein connection story in algorithm time. Flood the news cycle with counter-narratives. Isolate Netflix from the scandal. Recast Meghan as the wronged woman, once again. But they had a problem. Netflix wasn't answering their calls. A producer at the company, off the record, told Variety, "It's not about guilt. It's about distraction. They don't want to fight another news cycle. Not after the fallout from Prince Andrew. Not after Balenciaga. Not with so much on the line." The unsaid part? Netflix was preparing to sunset their relationship. They couldn't afford the risk. They'd ridden the Meghan-Harry wave long enough. The docuseries had performed. The awards had rolled in. But now, the tide was turning. Meghan's podcast deal had already gone cold. Spotify was long gone. Now, Netflix was quietly closing the curtain. And Archwell? It began to crack from within. Reports emerged that multiple mid-level staff had resigned without notice. Anonymous Glassdoor reviews popped up overnight. Toxic positivity culture. You can't question the narrative, or you're gone. All about the brand. Little about the mission. Meghan's head of partnerships, one of her longest-serving allies, was suddenly on sabbatical. Another executive was reassigned to internal consulting. In the PR world, these are not changes. They're cover-ups. The crisis team knew it too. They recommended a full pivot. We need a reframe. Meghan should release a video, not a statement. Lean into vulnerability. Say nothing legal. Let her cry. The goal? Take the power of the narrative back. But Meghan refused. She reportedly told the team, "I won't perform pain for people who want to destroy me." To some, that was strength. To others, it was hubris. Meanwhile, the palace, still publicly silent, was conducting its own analysis. Charles reportedly met with his communications chief and asked a single question. If the institution doesn't move, will people assume consent? The response? Yes, Your Majesty. And the longer we wait, the worse it looks. So the monarchy moved. Not through press conferences. Through infrastructure. Suddenly, Meghan's royal biography page disappeared from the royal.uk website. The Duchess of Sussex listing was replaced with a 404 error. a subtle erasure, but loud in digital terms. Royal charities once associated with Meghan were reassigned. Her patronages? Quietly removed. Mentions of her in the Royal Foundation's quarterly reports? Deleted. This wasn't petty. It was procedural, a public distancing. Meanwhile, Archwell Foundation's biggest corporate partner, an international wellness brand, froze its funding. Their official statement? We remain committed to our values and are conducting an internal alignment review of all philanthropic collaborations. Translation? They're gone. And with them, so was millions.